Story 1. The rest stop. All right. So I'm not someone who's into the paranormal or the supernatural. I don't believe in ghosts, monsters, aliens, or anything like that. However, I have to write about what happened to me last week because I honestly don't know how to explain it. I work in the sales department for a large company, and I'm frequently required to travel. When I have to go out of town for business, I almost always drive. I've always loved road trips, and I really enjoy the time alone. It's just me, some music, greasy fast food, and the open road. When I'm on a longer trip, I usually sleep in a hotel somewhere in the daytime and drive at night. There aren't as many people on the road, and there's less chance of getting a ticket for speeding. It was during my last road trip that I experienced something strange, and it was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I was driving through Texas along Interstate 40. I had left Amarillo and was planning to drive through Albuquerque to Flagstaff. Sometime after 1 a.m., I drove through a small town in Texas called Glenrio. Glenrio seemed to either be completely closed down at that time of night, or it was a total ghost town. About 10 miles later, there was a rest stop. As you can expect, it was just your typical dirty rest stop with a few vending machines and a restroom. I figured I'd pull in, use the restroom, maybe grab a candy bar and a soda from one of the machines, and continue along the interstate. First of all, there weren't any other cars parked at the rest stop, which isn't unusual outside a small town at that time of night. I parked my car and headed for the restroom. The restroom was dirty, dimly lit, with those stainless steel toilets. There was graffiti on the walls and along the mirrors, and that usual gross smell that's unique to rest stop bathrooms. There was nothing more unusual or strange about it than any restroom you'd see at any other rest stop in America. I stood in front of one of the urinals to do my business, and that's when I started hearing a strange noise. It sounded like laughter, but kind of gargled, almost like someone was laughing from underwater. I don't know how else to explain it. It wasn't a loud laughter, more of a chuckle. It was only for a moment, and then it stopped. Like I said, I'm a very rational person, so I didn't think much of it. I thought it was probably just a plumbing issue or something. Just before I had finished doing my business, I heard it again, only it was louder this time. Just a gargle laugh. The bathroom had several stalls, and, like I said, it was dimly lit. The sound was coming from the stall furthest down. The stall door was closed, and it was the stall with the least amount of light, rendering it almost totally dark. "Hello," I said. As soon as I spoke, the sound stopped again. "Is there anyone in there? Are you all right?" There was another sound, almost like someone dragging their feet. Then there was silence. I bent down so I could see underneath all the stalls. Now, like I said, there wasn't much light illuminating that particular bathroom stall, but I could tell there was no one in there. I shrugged and went to wash my hands before heading back out to my car. Just as I was drying my hands, I heard a creak. I never turned around, but behind my reflection in the mirror I could see the door to that dark stall slowly creaking open. What I saw instantly filled me with the worst sense of dread I've ever experienced. It looked like a man, but I knew it wasn't. The stall door had opened only just a crack, and I could see half of its face. It had a smile too large for its face, sharp yellow teeth, dark black eyes like a doll's, and no nose. It was almost gray in color, with patches of dirty black hair. I just stared at this thing, and it laughed again. The laugh was different this time. It sounded how the devil must sound if he were to laugh. I ran out of that bathroom like a bat out of hell, with that horrible laughter following me the whole time. I didn't stop and look back and see if that thing followed me out of the bathroom until I got to my car. I was alone in the parking lot, and whatever was never came after me. I continued my drive, and the rest of my trip was fine. I just made it back home yesterday and thought maybe it would help make sense of things if I wrote it down. Like I said, I'm a rational person. I don't believe in the paranormal or the supernatural, but if you're driving through Glen Rio, Texas, don't stop at any rest stops, just to be safe. Story 2. 3. This is a call for help. I don't know how much longer I have my iPad. My last connection to the outside world is down to 10%. A few more minutes to send out this desperate message is all I have left. You see, I'm stuck here, and I guess I have to fill you in on how exactly I got stuck in this shitty situation. It was an ordinary day. I woke up, got ready for the day, ate breakfast, school, homework, the daily routine. As per my routine, to finish the day I was to take a shit. So I did. Before anything else, I have to say that my bathroom is different from others. For reasons I don't know, the owner had a stall for the toilet, like those you'd find in those shitty public bathrooms. Perhaps he didn't want to see his fucked up face in the mirror the toilet faced. It didn't really matter, though. I've gotten used to closing and locking the stall every time I use the toilet. Call it a force of habit or an obsessive compulsion to use everything I come across. Next to the stall was a window and a narrow ledge where I put all my tissue. The ledge caused a small gap between the stall door and the window, great for stuffing more tissue or the occasional magazine I'd bring along. Nothing absolutely extraordinary or strange, but it was different. Anyway, I pulled my pants down, sat, and felt the cold plastic on my bare ass. With nothing left to do but let nature take its course, I pulled out my iPad and started reading. Of course, I started reading some creepypasta. It was late, quiet, and I was all alone. A perfect time to get a few goosebumps as I was reading and literally getting the shit scared out of me. I noticed a faint scratching on the stall door. It was as if a dog was scratching the flimsy plastic door, except it was slower, more deliberate. It stopped moments after I noticed it. I was unnerved. I didn't have a dog. It couldn't have been the wind. Those noises couldn't have been fake. I was scared as fuck, but I dismissed it. It must have been the plastic flexing from the temperature. Yeah, that was it. I continued to read. I was almost done shitting, to be honest, but I couldn't just leave my seat without finishing the story. Then I heard a drop, a soft thud. The stack of tissues wedged between the door and the window collapsed. It fell forward out from my reach. I checked the window outside. The night was as still as it could be. It couldn't have been the wind. It was something else, something from the inside. No, I was scaring myself. I slowly chuckled to myself. The roles were probably just unbalanced in the first place, so I continued. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, though. I set aside my iPad and slowly unlocked my stall. I gave it a slight push, but it wouldn't budge. I reasoned that it must have been rusty. I pushed harder and harder and harder. as hard as my seated position could muster. Yet it wouldn't move. It was as if someone on the other side was pushing back, holding me here. I was panicking. Some malevolent force was keeping me here. I knew what was to happen next. I would be killed or flayed or mutilated or driven to insanity. The scratching began again. Louder, louder, louder. I could feel the plastic slowly being ripped to pieces. I swear it was toying with me. Then I saw it, a hand, if you could call it that, crept up to the gap, reaching in. This was it. The hand was a rotting shade of green and gray, like it had just freshly dug itself out of the grave. It was putrid and overpowered the already foul smell of the stall. Its slender, bony fingers ventured into my stall, grasping for something, seeking to rend the flesh from my bones. I was frozen in fear. Imagine an inn like this, caught with my pants down, found dead on a toilet. The hand inched closer and closer. I could almost feel the cold death permeating from its cold, pale flesh. I was ready to die. It suddenly rushed. I closed my eyes and screamed. Tears came out of my eyes. Sweat came out of every single pore. Hell, I even pissed myself on the toilet. I waited. A few seconds, a few slow, agonizing minutes. I did nothing. I mustered up my courage and opened my eyes. It was gone. I was saved. I breathed deeply. No, I wasn't ready to die, and I'm glad I didn't. I pushed the door once more, and I was greeted by an empty bathroom. It took me a while, but eventually I realized my tissue. It was gone. All of it. This is a call for help, please. Somebody save me. I like triple ply. Story 3, The Warning. Endless, dark. That was the road in front of me, stretching out farther than the eye could see in this inky blackness. Not a star in the sky tonight, and the moon seemed to be hiding from view as well. That was okay, because I actually preferred the dark stretch. I found it calming to drive the narrow strip alone in the night. It wasn't often I had the opportunity to drive it and visit my parents in the country, and I was excited to see them. It had been a long time, too long. Being an only child, my parents had been devastated when I informed them I was moving to the city. With that being said, they of course supported me and invited me to visit often, which is how I found myself driving out after work. It was a long weekend, so I could stay Friday and Saturday and head back to the city on Sunday to have some me time. The road had been fun when I was a child. The hills and bumps always had me lifted off my seat, giggling and shouting wee. Every time we hit a large hill, my stomach would drop. I smiled at the memory, speeding up a little, intending to replicate the experience. The radio blasted a pop song up way too loud to be good for anyone's ears. But let's be honest, it wasn't like the music was that good anyway. I checked the speedometer. I pressed a little harder on the gas, confident that I could maneuver this particular road with little danger. My car loyally leapt over the hills, bouncing me off my seat time after time. I laughed as my stomach flipped and flipped. I saw a curve up ahead, and I started to gently hit my brakes. Just as I was going through the curve, a flash of blue up ahead caught my eye. Stop! Someone screamed. My reaction to seeing a person standing in the middle of the road was to stop immediately to avoid hitting them. When I saw it was a young girl, I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. I almost hit that girl. I admonished myself. Her dress was a pale blue, torn at the hem, and at the shoulder. The tear in the shoulder neatly matched the scratch on her arm, so I guessed she must have been running and caught a branch. Her hair was wet, matted down on one side, and she looked panicked. I felt sorry for her, but I was also scared. Did I help this girl? What was she doing in the middle of the road at this time of night? She stared at the car for a second, and then began screaming again. "Help me! You have to help me! He's going to kill me!" she cried, running toward the car. I had the doors locked, but her sudden movement had me reaching for the lock button. I glanced around, but I didn't see anyone else. Suddenly, I saw a man break through the bushes on the left. He was tall, with dark hair and a thick beard. Most importantly, though, he was covered in blood and holding a knife. He seemed to look around for a minute, taking in the car's bright lights, and noticed the girl. He started in the direction of the car, obviously going after the young girl who was frantically pulling at the door handle. "Please," she cried, tears pouring down her face, more afraid of the bloody, bearded man than the child. I pressed the unlock button hurriedly. Get in, I practically screamed, my heart racing. The man was so close to the car now. Any second he was going to reach it and kill us both. The girl slammed the door shut and locked it just as the man reached the front of the car. "Get out of the car," he screamed, banging his fists against the hood. The girl cowered in the seat, taking in the environment of the car and stealing a glance at me. She didn't respond to him. "Get out of the car right now. It's for your own good," he said, emphatically banging his fist on the hood again, knife gleaming in the headlights, and the glare momentarily blinding me. Suddenly, he began to move from the front of the car to the driver's side window. "Please get out of the car," he pleaded, his voice a little different this time, almost begging for her to get out of the car. I looked at him and noticed for the first time that he was looking at me. "Please get out. You've made a mistake. You don't know what." I felt something hard and cold slide through my lower ribs. I cried out in pain and looked at the girl incredulously. With a malicious smile, she slowly began to twist the knife. He had been warning me. Story 4. Flash. I've heard there are two kinds of people: those who have vivid dreams of things and events, some impossible, some mundane, some joyous, some horrible, and those who have the same kinds of dreams but don't remember them. I'd give anything if I could fit into either category. I remember my dreams, but dreams is a misnomer. It's the same dream every night, and it's not even a dream of a series of events. It's just a snapshot, a moment, a flash photo. But it's a snapshot I can't look away from, an eternal moment in which I experience indescribable horror. I can't remember not having this dream. It's been my companion my whole life. I'm in some room I don't recognize, and in the middle there's a kind of hole or vortex. But it's not a physical hole, and out of it is arising some horrific monstrosity. It doesn't see me yet, but it's about to turn its attention to me, and I know that when it perceives me, it will take me to hell with it to experience unbearable torment for eternity. It's the moment before the demon sees me, and I'm filled with an absolute terror, the terror of someone who knows he is damned forever. Every single night. Ironically, as a teenager, I started getting very interested in the occult. You'd think my dream would have had an adverse effect on that, but for whatever reason, I just never connected the two until much later, and when I did, it wasn't in the way you'd expect. It certainly didn't spark my interest, but as I grew older, I pursued my occultic activities more and more. By my early 30s, I was already one of the more advanced students in the craft. By my late 30s, however, I noticed something disturbing about my dream. It wasn't exactly the same. I remember as a child the demon was facing away from me. Not that it had a face, but its attention was on the opposite side of the room from where I was standing. But now it had turned. Its attention was on the side of the room to my right. It was still just a snapshot, but I could tell it was in the process of turning to face me and be aware of me, and I knew the moment it did what would happen. I started thinking that my dream was a premonition. This was my destiny, my doom, yet I didn't have the power in me to move off of the path I was on to avoid such a confrontation. It was almost as if the dream and my life had no connection. I was barely able to bring my dream to mind during my day-to-day activities. When I turned 50, I realized the demon had almost completed the turn. Its attention was almost upon me. But then my conception of the dream started changing. I had been thinking that my life was the reality, and the dream was a foreshadow or a message from another time in my life. But the opposite was the case. The dream was a reality, and my life was just a message. I don't mean that my life was just a shadow of some deeper reality. Although I suspect that's true, I mean something even weirder. You know how some people say that when you die your life flashes before your eyes? That's what my life was. I was reliving my life in the moment before the demon saw me. I was experiencing my life flashing before my eyes. The dream that I'd been having all my life wasn't a dream, it was the present moment. I had been playing with religion and had summoned a demon that would take me to hell. And in my final moment, my life was replaying itself, except there was a difference. If you keep choosing to be angry or hateful, you'll eventually reach the point where you can no longer choose not to be angry or hateful. Slowly, as we live our lives, we are taking away our own freedoms and eventually becoming the people we will be forever. I had spent nearly all my life making particular choices and selecting certain courses of action. I realize now that my choices were not just a turning towards the occult, but a running away from. I don't even want to say the word God. I had been rejecting him with every conscious thought for so long that I was no longer able to accept him. I had taken away my ability to choose him, and yet somehow I realize now as I approach my doom that I am being given the power to choose God. I don't want to choose him, but I know that I can. I am being buoyed up so that the effects of a lifetime spent rejecting him no longer force me to continue to do so. I can choose, I can actually choose, and a still, small voice inside me asks, "What do you choose?" Story 5, Visitor. The following incident occurred last Sunday. I was in my study typing an email for work when I fancied I heard a noise coming from my kitchen. I disregarded it. The house in which I live is old, and strange noises were not uncommon. Not 5 minutes later I heard the noise again. It was a clicking of some sort. I broke out into a cold sweat. It was the sound of the back door unlocking. I opened my desk, pulled out my revolver, and closed the drawer. I stood up and quietly made my way to the door of my study. I carefully opened the door and stepped into the hall. Darkness greeted me, thick and awful. a shroud hiding whomever was lurking in my house. Then again, the darkness was my protector as well. Knowing my house like the back of my hand, I didn't bother turning on the lights. If someone truly was here, I wanted to get the jump on them. I moved down the hall as silently as possible and listened as hard I could. Silence. Could I have been imagining things? As I mused over these points, a soft padding played its way from the direction of my kitchen to the other side of the house. No shoes or boots could make such a stealthy noise. Had the intruder removed his shoes before entering? The steps sounded lighter than a full-grown man's. They sounded like a child's footsteps or those of a large dog. At this point I decided to call out, "Hello." I bellowed loudly, the volume of my voice causing me to recoil. "Get a hold of yourself, man," I whispered to myself. I yelled out again, "I am armed and the police are on their way. Stupid me. Why hadn't I called the police when I was in the study?" I made my way to the kitchen, entered slowly, and saw that I was very much alone. Everything seemed to be in its place, yet when I turned the lights on I had to choke down a scream. The back door I had double locked for the night, only 2 hours before, lay wide open. Adding to the horror, I discovered 2 sets of small, muddy barefooted prints leading to the stairs. I closed the door quietly. Who the fuck is in my house, I thought, my mind beginning to race. And how did they undo the locks? I decided I would follow the footprints, and a new sound impressed itself upon my ears. The sound of muffled conversation came from above. Whoever was in my house had made their way to the upstairs bedroom. I steeled my nerves and swallowed the lump in my throat. This was my house. Whoever was whispering in my bedroom was invading my privacy and threatening my safety. I had to deal with it. I made to the bottom of the steps, switched on the light and yelled, "Show yourself." Weighted silence greeted me. "I have a gun and I will use it. Surrender yourself." My adrenaline began to pump, and no longer cautious, I took the stairs to buy 2, slam, opened my bedroom door, and leveled the gun at nothing. My large bedroom, the only room on the 2nd floor, was entirely empty. I looked at the floor, found the same footprints that were in the kitchen, only they stopped in the middle of the room. My blood ran cold. I checked the closet and under the bed, but there was no one to be seen. Was I going mad? I made my way back into hall. When the door suddenly slammed closed behind me, I shouted in terror and bounded back down the stairs, through the kitchen, and into my study. I slammed the door and locked it tight. I collapsed in my chair and passed out. Footsteps. I awoke just in time to hear them pad their way down the stairs, across the kitchen, and, to my horror, stop outside my study door. Locks seemed powerless to stop these entities, and I waited for the knob to turn. Instead, I heard something that chilled my blood, a voice whispering in the hall. A horrible voice belonging to someone no longer alive. My heart pounded, my blood froze in my veins, my lips moved, and my throat uttered a gibbering mess. The doorknob began to turn, the locks disengaging as if by magic. The door creaked open slowly. Nothing. Emptiness, darkness. I feared I had gone truly mad. Then again the sounds of footsteps, but this time going away from my study. The back door opened and closed, leaving me in deafening silence. After what seemed like an eternity, I stood and shakily made my way to the kitchen. The light was still on, and nothing seemed out of order. The back door was closed, and I could see that the lock was again engaged. Looking around, I noticed a piece of paper on the table. I moved closer, picked up the note, and began to laugh horribly. It read, "Sorry, wrong house. Story 6, The Storm Cellar." The storm door clacked against its frame. Without rhythm, chickens scuttered through the dirt, clucking restlessly. The clouds had sunk low over the farmhouse. They smothered the earth, draining the red shutters and dirty white house of their color. "Mama, there's no time." Verna was walking Pa down the porch steps. His tattered shirt, once white and pressed, was now milky gray. He hunched to navigate the uneven ground. Annie was shooing the chickens into the house. She looked up and put her hands to her hips. "You keep your dress on, Vern. This ain't nothin' but a windspout." Pa's crutch kicked up dust. "Annie," he called, "Annie, grab Boo out of the barn. I got it tied up in there." She had cornered the last chicken into the kitchen. She slammed the banging screen door and threw the copper hook into its place. "I tell you, news in this county ain't worth a spread of shit. No warning, nothin'." As she said it, the town siren's wailing roared across the farm. "Ha!" She threw her calloused hands up to the sky. "Not too soon either, Mama," Verna called. Her head poked out from the storm cellar. "Mama, hurry up." Annie pointed at her. "Verna, you better ease up, girl. What happens when a real one show up? What are you gonna do then?" Verna didn't seem to hear her over the howling wind. She was beckoning wildly. Annie gestured at the barn. "Boo!" she screamed. "Boo!" Verna looked off at the horizon, her fingers on her lips. Annie strode to the barn. "I've seen 100 in my life, and I'll see 100 more. Getting in a fit hasn't earned me a penny, and I will not be startin' now." She swung open the barn doors. The tawny dog was roped to the tiller, whimpering and pawing the ground. "You too," Annie said. "Lord on high." She found a pair of shears on the work table, and, coming around behind the dog, cut the rope Boo tore out of the barn. "Hey, hey, Boo, you get your sorry ass over here." Annie followed her out, watching Boo vanish through the broken boards under the house. She made her way to the hole, the wind shrieking in her ears. "Boo, you get out here right now, or so help me." A tremor made its way up through her legs. The earth itself seemed to rumble. She looked down. The pebbles hopped amongst each other. Above her, the sky kept its light-gray hue, but Annie could now see the clouds very clearly, curling, circling. Annie was rooted to the ground. Her wispy hair whipped across her face, catching in her eyelashes. The wind screamed in her ears, its pitch rising to a whistle. In her wide eyes was the reflection of the funnel, touching down as if by divine orchestration, just behind the barn. The barn walls swayed and heaved until, one by one, long crimson boards lifted themselves from it and disappeared into the vortex. Railroad ties were ripped from the framework. She didn't notice the gravel lashing her face hard enough to draw blood. She was watching her barn and build itself. Annie didn't think to move. She didn't think anything, only waited for nature to make the next move, decide her fate. While she stood awestruck, a hand closed around her arm. She turned. His crutch was nowhere to be seen. He screamed at her. She heard nothing. She noticed the blood vessels around the tip of his nose. They looked like tiny lilacs, she thought. With his hand gripped tightly around her, he led her to the storm cellar, gingerly putting weight on his bad leg and moving it to his other. when the leg gave out on him. The tears from his eyes sprayed her face as they went. Behind her she heard popping sounds that sounded like the bursting of little nebulas. She saw glass and dirt and roots, and splintered would soar past her in a soup of brown wind. They reached the cellar. Annie could see Verna at the bottom. He thrust her down the steps before him. Before Annie could reach the floor, her head exploded in pain. Verna's face was frozen in terror before her. The light went gray, then black. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. There was whimpering when she woke. Verna was kneeling over her. Behind Verna's head was darkness save for a square of bright blue. Clouds floated past. Verna's lips were pulled back in a silent sob. Tears collected at her chin, dripping onto her mother's collar. "Vern," she said. "Verna, darlin'." Verna coughed out a sob. She hugged Annie. "Oh, Mama," Verna mumbled. "Mama." They held each other. Behind a wooden crutch lay across the stairs, hidden in the darkness cast by the closed cellar door, story 7. Julia Legari. "A few years ago I was spending some time with friends exploring old, supposedly haunted places. We were at the Edisto First Presbyterian Church, where a girl named Julia Legari was buried in her family mausoleum in 1852. People reported hearing unearthly screams time and time again, but never investigating the cause of it. 15 years later, when they opened the door to the mausoleum to enter, the next family member who had died, finding her corpse huddled in the corner next to the door, arms outstretched as if still trying to find the exit. Well, my friends thought it would be a funny idea to shut the giant stone door which was originally open behind me and pick me up in the morning. The bastards left me there. I tried and tried, using all of my strength, but I couldn't budge. It had taken for people to put it in place. In the dark, I resigned myself to the night ahead of me. Now, I normally don't frighten easily, but sitting there in the relatively small place, surrounded by a looming pressure that I couldn't begin to explain, the darkness itself seemed to try to consume me. From all around it felt like weight was pressing against my skin, making even breathing hard. I sat in the dark for what must have been hours. Then I heard the scratches. They were faint at first. I was sure it was my imagination, but soon they became more and more frantic as time passed. I huddled up in one of the corners farthest from the door and tried to cover my ears, but nothing could stop the growing cacophony. This all may have lasted for a few minutes, but each second was an unbearable eternity. Then a loud scream echoed through the darkness. It was a wail of unrestrained pain and fear. The scratching stopped. For the first time I could distinctly make out the sound of a girl sobbing to herself, the pitiful gasping of one without a shred of hope left. I felt such sorrow at the moment, such pain, that I think I forgot how to be afraid. In my heart all her suffering seemed to resonate. Inexplicably, I found myself apologizing loud for everything that had happened to her. Hell, a part of me wanted to reach out and feel for a body to hug, but I couldn't bring myself to do it for fear that I truly would find one. I don't know whether or not she heard me or was even aware of my presence. The sobbing continued, and I could again hear fingers against the stone slab that was the tomb door. I fell asleep at some point, which I felt was a merciful gift from the fates. I'm not sure how long I was out, but I was woken by a loud and powerful thud as the door slammed against the ground outside. I could tell from the light gray outside that daybreak was near. so I must have slept for at least a few hours. I stumbled outside and went to a small unlocked prayer house. I think previously was a segregated mini-church, but regardless, I leaned against the door and waited nervously until my friends arrived. I approached them as they clustered around the fallen door. Two of them were kneeling next to it with faces of shock. There were bloody streaks covering the interior of the door, some with light scratches from fingernails, many without. I think now that she must have shrieked when they broke away from her hands, but I can't be sure. At first they looked to me, then checked my hands, then nervously glanced at one another. I was rightfully pissed with them and told them every detail of what I remembered, wanting them to know what I had been put through. Finally, after I grudgingly got into the car and we started to head back, someone spoke up. My friend said to me we were afraid to say anything, but look at your face. I later found out that many times people had tried to permanently seal the entrance to the mausoleum, including enough heavy locks and chains that it would require heavy equipment to remove it, only to have it found torn open with the door lying on the ground once more. This was in the 1980s, the last attempt of many through the decades. It seemed like some force was ensuring that it was impossible to ever repeat the mistakes of the past. This is something I am understandably quite grateful for. But to this very day I am chilled to the bone when I think of what happened that night. When I reached from the back seat and adjusted the rearview mirror, I saw that there was blood caked on my face, just like the streaks upon the stone slab. There were dark red lines on either side, as if someone had gently cradled my face with torn fingers. As I slept that night, feeling the warmth of another for the first time in over 100 years. Bonus stories. Story 1. Old Mr. Duck. I've never liked taking my son, Ben, along on business trips, especially now he's at that tireless, inquisitive age where everything is either utterly boring or fascinating. Any parent will know just what I mean, but Ben's father, who's a handyman, was working long hours all weekend, and the regional office had a creche I could use, so I decided to turn the trip into a weekend break. The hotel in Atlanta, Georgia was pretty, but well past its best, the sort of place with lots of empty rooms. Cheap, in other words, which was everything to me. The polite elderly guy on reception took a real shine to Ben and myself, and insisted on giving us the penthouse suite at the regular room rate, since no one else was using it. The suite was huge, 2 adjoining bedrooms, and a spacious lounge. Plenty of space for Ben to play whilst I sat on my bed and worked on my presentation, which nobody would care about. Old Mr. Duck's in here, Mommy. Ben ran out of the bathroom, looking delighted. I barely looked up from my ancient laptop, plugged in as the battery went 3 years previously. Do you mean old Mr. Duck, sweetie? He couldn't yet pronounce his T's. Old Mr. Duck. Old Mr. Duck. He was bouncing with glee. He's in bathroom, saying things, come see, Mommy. I said I'd go look later, pleased he'd made an animal friend to amuse himself, even if it was imaginary. But ducks don't say things, honey. They quack. So why don't you go quack back? I was so engrossed in my stupid project that I didn't notice that it was growing dark outside. Ben's giggles from the lounge spurred me to shut my laptop and call him in. I'll order us some food. Buddy, sorry Mommy's not been a whole bunch of fun today. S.O.K., Mommy. Old Mr. Duck been quack, quack, quacking how he loves you." This made me smile, though I wondered what had brought a duck to Ben's mind, as we were about as far from any pond as possible. That night Ben insisted he be allowed to sleep alone in the other bedroom. I agreed, as he'd been so well behaved all evening. I heard him whispering softly until late, and figured he was excited about being away from home and making a new make-believe friend. I imagined hearing faint, raspy quacks echoing as I drifted off to sleep, and heard tiny duck footsteps somewhere above me. The next morning I found Ben curled up under his bed in a grumpy mood. "Whatever's the matter, sweetheart? Doesn't old Mr. Duck want to play today? Old Mr. Duck left me all alone, laws. Nay, he liked seeing you sleep more'n me." I felt an icy draught tingle the goose flesh on the back of my neck, and looked up to see that the ancient ventilation shaft above the head of Ben's bed was missing its grill cover, which I was sure hadn't been the case the previous evening. I rushed back into my room to find an identical setup above my own bed. As I stood still and peered into the black metal passageway just big enough to fit a person, it dawned on me that Ben's dad would have taught him the word duct, as he was forever fixing them in our ancient apartment block. I'd noticed similar shafts in the suite's bathroom and lounge, too. "You look in for old Mr. Duck, S.O.K., Mommy. He quacked me where we lived, so I quacked him our address. Story 2, a walk-in." The Dark and a Hamilton didn't see herself as a suspicious person, that when someone's been following her for quite a while she gets a queasy feeling in her stomach. Guaranteed she was out late, but she was strong, and from taking the new karate classes she knew she couldn't and wouldn't be defeated. Anna picked up the pace, her legs and arms pumping as she turned her walk into a brisk one, looking back to see that the dark silhouette was still following her, and I had the strongest urge to spin around and smack the stranger's face and demand them to answer why the hell they are following her at this time of night. But her mind argued with her, saying how just maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the stranger was just going the same way as her. A few more minutes, and she had came to the entrance of her cookie-cutter home. She hated it, but she wanted to humor her mother and to make it seem as if she actually cared about the presence of the house, so she had put flower pots randomly. This neighborhood had no history of crimes. What Anna has seen news, and people seemed to get crazier by the second. She turned at a 90-degree angle up her driveway, and what now seemed to look like a man slowed his step, making Anna grow even more concerned. "Look, can I help you with something? Are you lost, or did you just want to follow me for the hell of it?" Anna finally confronted the man, but all the man did was look up at her with haunted eyes and moved his head forward once again. It was almost robotic. "Well, I'm going inside now." Anna unlocked the door, and with suspicions, she locked it up quickly behind her, watching as the man walked into the foggy night. The next day, and Anna had almost forgotten about the whole ordeal. But looking out her bedroom window, she could see the shape of a man standing right outside her property, toes barely touching the curb of her yard. Turning around, she turned on the light, and to make sure she wasn't crazy, she turned back to her window, only to see the mysterious man had gone. Walking with her purse across of her shoulder, she headed to her place of work, which so happened to be the library. If someone would ask, she would say she loved her job, the smell of books, and the hushed laughter of the school kids. Everyone loved Anna, too. She was known to be the cool librarian, as she let the kids sneak in food and drinks or let them be a little too rambunctious. As always, her fellow librarian and friend, Katie, sat on one of the desks behind the tall counter, but instead of the latest Cosmo issue, she had a newspaper in hand. My dear Katie, is that actually a newspaper in your hands? I never knew I would be alive the day that Katie Price would read it. Tana joked, and Katie stuck her tongue out in response. Anna put her bag in the crew room and went to sit next to her friend, peeking over her shoulder. Anna's eyes furrowed, and she pointed to a picture of a man that looked very similar. Hey, I know him. Katie looked interested and set the newspaper down an inch. You do? How? Anna shrugged. He's weird. He followed me home yesterday, and I think I saw him outside my lawn this morning. Are you sure, Anna? Anna looked at her friend in confusion. Yes, of course. Why? He was murdered 2 weeks ago. Story 3. Chat. It was a regular Friday night, and I was up late chatting to my friend Bradley on this virtual chat room we had found online. He told me and the other guys we had just met that he was able to stay up as late as he wanted because his parents were away until the weekend and he had the house to himself. We stayed on there for a few hours having fun with these random people, and I noticed Bradley had taken a liking to one girl in particular. Soon enough, my mom began calling out for me to go to sleep. As I was about to log off, I asked Bradley what he was doing tomorrow, thinking he might want to stop by my place. He didn't reply for a while until Bradley is typing a message. Then it went blank. Bradley is typing a message. Nothing again. Whatever, man. I'm going to bed. We'll talk about it tomorrow, I said. It was strange for him, too. Just stop replying like that. I didn't hear from him again until the next day, when I logged on to the chat site and he was on. He apologized for not replying last night and said he had just been busy. We had a brief exchange, and he said he would come over soon, saying it was urgent. That was fine, but queried him why he didn't want to wait to see his parents first, who would be home any minute. He insisted there was no time because he had something really important to show me, and then log straight off. I thought that was out of character for him, as he usually put his family before anything, and I grew curious at what he wanted to show me so badly. I expected him to be over soon, as he only lived about 20 minutes away, when I received a disturbing phone call. It was Bradley's parents, who had just come home and were sounding extremely worried. They asked if I knew anything on Bradley's whereabouts, to which I told them not to worry, because he was in fact on his way over. The phone fell silent for a moment until I heard a deathly scream from the mother in the background on the other end of the line. The father drew a deep breath and bravely strung together a sentence that I'll never forget. Get out of the house now. Bradley's here. He's dead. They had found Bradley's lifeless body hung up like a coat in the wardrobe. I ended the call in shock as it became apparent why he had asked if I would be home alone, when suddenly I heard the back door creak open. Instinctively, I did the first thing I could think of and quickly crawled under my bed to hide. I heard the sound of footsteps coming closer, ever so slowly. I dared not to open my eyes, but when I dreadfully peeked through my fingers, I saw these pale white, cold, bare feet coming into my room, almost in slow motion. I would hate to see the person such feet belong to as they slowly approached the bed. You could hear the dampness of the footsteps peeling away from the floorboards. My heart was pounding in my mouth, and I held my breath. Just when I couldn't possibly get any more scared, my phone let off a loud beep to notify me that I had received a message. It was from Bradley's phone and read, "Where are you?" As the feet stopped abruptly, dead in their tracks. Story 4. Hammer and Nails. You are standing at the top of the ancient wooden staircase, looking down at the darkness beneath. Shelf after shelf of dusty supplies and stacks of books line the basement walls. You remember your mother's words, "Could you please go get me a hammer and some nails?" This is nothing but a storage room, nothing to be afraid of, but it's so dark. You hesitantly take a step downwards, down the creepy old staircase, and the stair creaks loud, enough to wake the dead. You continue down the stairs to the basement. One filthy window guards the wall past the staircase, and it attempts to illuminate the room. But the darkness in this basement is so thick, light can't seem to permeate. You search for a switch, and you eventually find a string connected to the ceiling light, so you pull it, and nothing happens, and the room remains obscured by artificial night. You walk around in darkness for a few minutes, and eventually, when your eyes have adjusted, you find an antique dollhouse resting on a table. You open it, and you see that it is frighteningly realistic. There is flowered wallpaper on the walls in the master bedroom, an opening refrigerator in the kitchen containing miniature food, and tiny cloth blankets on all the beds. There are even porcelain dolls with realistic faces. You soon realize that the dolls are you and your mother, and that the dollhouse is an exact replica of your house. You see a tiny, hairy spider scuttling along the edges of the house, and you squish it with your hand. But then there are more spiders. You grab a can of bug poison from a shelf nearby and spray until all the spiders wither and die. Suddenly the dolls fall over, and their porcelain faces crack, and suddenly the air in the basement becomes much thicker, and you can't breathe. You run back to the top of the stairs, gasping for breath, but the door has mysteriously locked. You bang on the door as hard as you can, repeatedly, but it is no use. You wipe the sweat off your face, which happened to be mixed with blood. You feel yourself becoming tired, and then numb. Finally, a shock runs through your body, and you succumb to paralysis, falling down the stairs like a limp rag doll. You slowly open your eyes to find the lights on. You blink a few times, and yes, the lights are still on, shining brightly and intensely. You move your aching limbs and try to stand. It takes effort, but you manage. You stare at the table which once supported the dollhouse. The dollhouse has vanished. But even more intriguing is the long wooden box propped up against the wall to the far left. You tentatively walk closer, shivering with each cold breath you take, and you realize what the box is: a coffin, a large wooden coffin, engraved in gold letters. Your mother's last name. Curiosity gets the better of you, and you move your fingers to the coffin, pushing the lid slightly to find the coffin empty. Suddenly you hear a female voice behind you. "It's okay, I found the hammer and nails." You turn around to see your mother with pale white skin and blue lips, but that's not what you notice first. A series of cracks run through her face, with blood dripping from the crack lines. Her gray eyes flash for a split second, and she opens the coffin and pushes you inside it. Shutting the door behind her, you are trapped. The last thing you hear is the sound of a hammer pounding the nails into your coffin. Story 5: The Loss. No one knew where it came from or how it happened. It was just another sunny, dull, and happy day in the small Michigan town. When it began, it occurred with the small things first, like memories of anniversaries or memories of where the car keys were. Memories simply disappeared, and even when people found where the car keys were or were reminded of their anniversaries, they would lose those memories in less than a minute. Of course, no one really minded the few people whose memories were the first to go. Maybe they were simply getting old and possibly developing Alzheimer's disease. Whatever the case, no one expected it would spread until everyone began having severe memory loss. Some forgot what jobs they had, others forgot their names, and many forgot where their keys were. Even when reminders were written, things were forgotten as soon as they were read. After the memory loss, the physical loss began. Cars that were parked on certain spots in the street simply disappeared as soon as people looked away. Random items started disappearing with no explanation, but everyone was too busy wondering about what else they had forgotten to notice what went missing. Some rambled about how God was punishing them. Others broke down emotionally from forgetting their children's names or from losing valuables. No one knew how it could possibly get worse until it did. Abilities started disappearing. At first, it was only the baker who lost his ability to bake. But then the mechanic forgot how to use a hydraulic lift and crushed himself with a car until everyone lost random abilities. Crashed cars filled the streets from people trying to flee, only to suddenly realize that they lost the ability to drive. Some people sat crying on the streets because they lost their abilities to communicate. By the second week, everything was falling apart. Everyone had forgotten how to speak. Clothing randomly disappeared. Some starved because they had also forgotten how to eat. All the cars had disappeared without a trace, along with random pieces of technologies such as televisions and computers. Not that it mattered, because everyone had also lost their abilities to use them. Some lost their will to live and sat there crying because they forgot how to die until they simply disappeared. Cats and dogs were all lost, but no one had any idea how to find them because most had lost the ability to walk. I could not stand any longer, so I simply walked. I walked as far as I could from that place. I was lucky that I could still walk. To this day, I have no idea what happened to the town or how it happened. I walked for miles until I collapsed near a quiet road. I was lucky that some old couple driving a pickup truck found me and drove me to a local hospital. I was treated and retaught how to eat, speak, and read again. I doubt that I will ever remember my name or the name of my town. But I write this to say that unexplained things happen. I can only imagine what else the people of the town lost next. They could have easily lost their youth and turned into old piles of skin and bone. They could have lost their minds and soon their bodies. All I know is that the whole town was simply just lost. Now you, the reader, might think that this is simply ridiculous after all. Nothing is simply just lost, right? Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever started to say something but simply lost what you were about to say? Story 6. The Man Dressed in Black. I was raised in southern Arizona, but as a young teen I ran away from home and found my way even deeper south, toward Mexico. Young and with no money, I found myself living on the streets and prostituting my body for food. Eventually, I started using any drug available, my favorite being heroin. For a few years, I had gotten used to the lifestyle and even made a few friends. One of my friends, Alejandro, was probably the only person I had met while on the streets who wouldn't take advantage of me. He seemed like he was raised in one of those God-fearing families. His morals, though limited, were there between hits of whatever drugs we got our hands on that day. We soon became best friends when the two of us ran out of money for food and drugs. He liked to spend our time under the shelter of the church at a little mission out in the desert. On summer nights, instead of going inside, we sat against the wall and watched the orange sunset fall behind the mountains. It was one of those evenings that we met the man dressed in black. He approached us quietly and actually had startled me a bit when he turned around the corner of the mission wall. As he reached us, I noticed how strangely the man walked. It was quite a limp, but it was a normal walk either. To this day, I couldn't explain it except that maybe he wasn't quite human. Anyway, I had donned him the name man dressed in black because of his clothing. Despite the walk, the man looked like a rich man. His jet black hair was slicked back. Noticeably, he wore a dark black suit and tie. His eyes that looked Alejandro and me over were even black as it gets on a moonless night. As soon as he reached us, a chill went down my spine. I knew this man was up to no good, and when I looked at Alejandro, I could tell he did too. In fact, Alejandro had a look of fear on his face. I was confused. The man dressed in black wasn't that scary. "You're hungry," the man said before even saying any sort of greeting. In his hands was money which he handed to me. Quickly I reached for it and stuffed the bills into my pockets. Alejandro, though, didn't reach for anything. He kept his eyes on the man's legs. "Don't take anything," Alejandro whispered to me in a warning tone. I ignored him and continued to grab money even, though I could feel a strange chill going down my spine once again. "Don't take his money," Alejandro said once again, but louder. I turned to him angry that he was embarrassing such a generous man. "Shut up," I told him, and when I turned back to the man, he was gone. I got up to see where he had gone, but when I looked around the wall, there was nothing except strange, inhuman footprints in the dirt, and that was when I could feel true fear creep over me. "Didn't you see his feet?" Alejandro asked me as we left the mission. "Of course you didn't. You were too busy looking at his hands, what he had for you in his hands. You didn't even try to look at his feet. That man was the devil." I didn't answer him, still shaken up from my experience with the man dressed in black. I just stood there looking at the man's footprints, and sure enough, they looked like something that had a chicken foot and a hoof had been there. Story 7, 11/11. A young girl suffered from insomnia, and throughout the night she'd often wake up for no reason. One night she awoke, and in the daze of half-sleep, she blinked in the darkness. Just for a second, she thought she saw a pair of reptilian eyes gazing at her and glowing red. She sat up and stared at them, quickly realizing that it was only her clock. It was 11:11. She sighed and tried to go back to sleep. The next night, she awoke and instantly looked at the clock. It was exactly 11:11. This began to repeat itself night after night, sometimes even during the day. For no reason whatsoever, she would stop whatever she happened to be doing and spin around to look at the nearest clock, always at 11 minutes past 11 o'clock. As her insomnia got worse, she thought she'd try some white noise to help her sleep. She turned on her clock radio to play music softly. It worked well. so she kept doing it for the next few nights. One night, she awoke with a terrible start, covered in cold sweat. Rather than being in a sleepy daze, she was completely awake now. The radio was still on, but instead of music she heard static and a lot of erratic clicking noises. Breathing heavily, she stared at the glowing numbers. You know what time it was? Bang! Her heart nearly jumped out of her chest. A door had just slammed to her right outside of the room. She heard a pair of inhumanly rapid footsteps running from the sound of the door slam, all the way around her, behind her head, and to her left. Another bang as a door was slammed shut. Her blood ran cold. Her bedroom was on the second story, and the wall behind her faced outside. There were no doors or floor there. Suddenly she felt an urge to run. She didn't care where. She leapt from her bed and ran faster than she'd ever run in her life. In what felt like less than the blink of an eye, she'd run through the hall, down the stairs, out the door, and to the end of the street. She doubled over, panting. After a moment she looked back at her house, at her dark bedroom window. She stared at it for a long time. When at last she began to feel calm again, she carefully walked back to the house. She'd left the front door ajar, and a lot of cold air had gotten in. She closed it behind her and turned on all the lights as she made her way back to her bedroom. She hesitated the most as she turned on her own light. The room looked perfectly normal, but as soon as she heard the static coming from the radio, she rushed over and switched it off. After that night, she never listened to that radio again. The girl didn't sleep a wink for many nights. She told only a handful of people what had happened. Her parents, a few of her friends. The responses were all more or less the same. It was just a dream. It only felt real. You were so tired. Maybe you just imagined it. I believe you believe it happened. Name removed. What you need to know is that this story is very true. To this day, the girl, well, she's a woman now, has never slept soundly. None of us know for sure what is so special about 11:11, but she did tell me this. Whenever that moment strikes the clock, she feels the same strange sensation. She says it's just like that feeling you get when you know you're being watched.